Greetings, and welcome to Gobbocast 19, where we interview Jason Bulmahn and Erik Mona of Paizo Publishing. They were the presenters at a session here at DragonCon 2014 entitled Pathfinder Video Games. We also did an interview with them after the session, and we're actually going to reverse that and put that before the session itself. And they provide us with some interesting challenges, as well as some insights on what their personal feelings are about the game, what they've experienced, what they'd like to see. The session itself was a little strained because there was a live performance in the salon on the other side of the wall, which was quite loud, and we heard a lot of it. And unfortunately, so will you. Our separate interview with him was done in one of the rooms behind the gaming areas, and it was not the most quiet either, as well as having bumped the video camera so we see some of the boxes in the corner. In any event, I think you'll find both sessions very enlightening. I think it's very informative, and I hope you enjoy it. So we'll give you our interview with Jason Bulmahn and Erik Mona.
Guys, I really appreciate you being here and giving me a chance to interview for Gobbocast. First off, what did you think about the session you just had when we talked about PFO for the people?
I thought it was great. It was really interesting. The room was pretty much full, lots of good questions about the game. People seemed genuinely interested in what's going on, and it was exciting to see.
Cool.
Yeah, there was good energy, and people seem to be asking the right kinds of questions. You know, it's kind of a different kind of MMO. You know, it's not like, you know, Warcraft or any of those, right? So, you know, to see people really engage and really get interested in some of the things that they're trying to do is really cool.
Well, I really appreciate you telling us how much you're involved with the GoblinWorks team by coming to the meetings every week. I know there's a lot of synergy between the two companies, but have you both played? You said you both have played the alpha in the plant.
Oh yeah, absolutely, yeah.
You know, so what are your personal viewpoints of how you've been playing and what you've seen? What do you personally like about it yourselves?
Well, right now, I mean, every time I log on, it's a new game, right? And that's really cool. Every time I hop in, there's a whole lot of new stuff to explore. They keep adding more and more and more. It seems like, you know, every few weeks, out comes a new build with a whole bunch of new stuff for us to play with. And that's really exciting to see. I'm really enjoying seeing the development of it. I've played a lot of video games when they're done, and to get to see them as they're constructed is really kind of fascinating.
Yeah, I think for me what's been most exciting is just the development of it. You know, the first couple of builds, it was just like, oh my god, there's one of our goblins who's 3D, you know, I mean, that in and of itself was really amazing to see. But you know, in the early builds, you couldn't really do much. You're just pretty much walking around, checking it out, hoping you don't fall through the floor, you know, that kind of thing.
And it happened to me a couple times, yeah.
And as they've continued to iterate and add new stuff, it's now like becoming a game, you know, and it's been really exciting to see the builds and the alpha work toward the game that we've been talking about for so long. You know, now you can finally fight each other. There's spells, there's stuff like that. You're starting to see the beginnings of the economic system coming into it. And you can kind of, even though the settlement stuff's not in yet, you can kind of see like, oh, I understand now how the settlements will probably be placed in this location. Oh, okay, I get it. And so it's moving from the realm of the theoretical to the realm of the real, and that's what's most exciting for me.
Excellent. You've talked about how you want to make sure that all the mechanics and the lore still doesn't contradict one another between the Galaron world and the River Kingdoms world of PFO.
Right.
Where do you see that synergy increasing or becoming more enmeshed, or do you see it being there?
Well, I mean, I know that they're working on a lot of stuff, right? As of right now, the game doesn't have any Hell Knights in it, but that's a big part. That's a major faction in the game. You know, it does have the Church of Razmir, which Jason created, so you're seeing that. You're starting to see more than just monsters, right? At first it was, okay, there's goblins, and then there's ogres, and then there's goblin dogs, and now you're getting Church of Razmir, and you're going to start seeing, you know, Hell Knights and Eagle Knights of Andoran and Pathfinders and all that kind of stuff. And I think that as they continue to build the resources for this game, it's going to feel even more sort of authentically Pathfinder.
Yeah, it's becoming kind of more and more our world with each passing day.
You know, they've talked about in some of the interviews we had with Gobbocast about the eventual inclusion of a faction system, and then how one can become in line with a faction and have inter-faction interactions that will feed some of the war mechanics, for example. How do you see the faction functionality of Paizo's Galaron coming into this world? Do you want to see more of that? How do you feel about that faction world coming in?
I think from a start, it's pretty robust. They're grabbing what's important to that region. We have a lot of factions in our world well beyond this, and I think over time they might start tinkering with some of those. But I think right now they're focused on those that logically make sense to have a big presence in the River Kingdoms. So I don't know what their plans are beyond that. Do you have any insight?
I think that they've talked a little bit about some stuff. I'd probably be tortured alive if I explained. But I know they're not just playing in the short term; they're playing long term. They've got some cool ideas. Again, I think that the idea that as they iterate and as the game grows, it becomes more and more Pathfinder-y. I think that will continue even after, frankly, after the launch of the game. And so it's just going to be really interesting to watch.
The evolution is going to be very nice to see.
Yeah, absolutely.
What would you like to see in the game?
I already got my clerics of Rasmir. And liches. Yeah, lots of liches. The lich escalation.
I have a real hard time answering that question because I'm tempted to say I'd love for my own personal player character to appear in the game, as a playable guy by me.
Yes.
But my personal player character's name is Ostog the Unslain.
Yes.
And I feel like putting that into a PvP MMO is quite an invitation for a name change.
You're just asking for that.
So his reputation I may have to exclude him from this game just so I can keep my name. But I'm really looking forward to actually. Interestingly enough, the stuff I'm most looking forward to is not the stuff that's like uniquely Galarian, but some of the settlement stuff, some of the big picture, the war and the battling and the sieging and stuff like that. I've never played a game that has a really robust element where you're going up against other humans, and in my experience, going up against other humans is always more challenging and interesting than going up against even the smartest AI, And so I think that's going to be really interesting. In a weird way, I think that the game is more like a simulator of what the world would be than what the Pathfinder RPG would be.
Yeah.
And in this part of the world, it is the most cutthroat, it's the most PvP part of our world, right? And so you put that into a computer game, and it'll be interesting to see what happens. When we're doing the tabletop stuff, it's like, well, I don't know, Jason, what do you want to have happen? Well, I think this is how it should play out.
Yeah.
But in Pathfinder Online, this is going to be happening in real time, and God only knows what's going to end up happening. And to me, that's really exciting. I know it's going to be a lot of murder. That's what I hear.
I think that the speed is going to actually be phenomenal to watch too. I think it's going to change faster than anyone thinks.
I hope so in a way. I think it's going to be really interesting, and I also hope that people put enough of their heart and their time into it that they really want to defend some of their places.
Yeah.
That there are some long-lasting developments in the game. I think it's going to be really cool.
Defend your home, feeling like this is your home.
Right,
yeah,
exactly. And also sort of building the social structures with other players to be able to make sure that home is safe.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not just I play a lot of one-player, console games and stuff. I turn off the game, it's over.
Yeah.
That's not the case here. It really behooves you to have lots of people watching your back.
Yeah, you need friends.
Yeah, that was one thing that drew me to this, was that while you can succeed at a certain level individually, you can't really succeed in a great sense without the help of others. You must become connected to others to do this.
Exactly.
Is there anything that you personally, or you as someone who represents Paizo, would like to say to our Gobbocast listeners, and also the people who might be listening in on YouTube, because we are putting these interviews on YouTube now? Would you like to say something to them in particular?
I won't kill you if you don't kill me.
I will kill you unless you kill him.
That seems only fair.
Gentlemen, thank you very much for your time. It's very generous for you to be here.
Thank you. Good
Happy to talk to you, and we'll see you in the game.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Let's never look at that again.
Sit like pros.
Yes. We can sit with the best of them. Hi, everybody.
Hi, Erik.
I'm Erik Mona. I'm the publisher at Paizo Inc.
And I'm Jason Bulmahn. I'm the lead designer at Paizo Inc.
I don't think your mic's on.
So, we may or may not have an additional surprise guest kind of blow in here in a few minutes. minutes. But this is the panel about Pathfinder Video Games, which, thank you, which is a topic that is really about the first time we can actually have this topic, because there are some Pathfinder video games, but they're all currently in development. So so our background, just by everyone in here know what Pathfinder is?
Oh, good.
Raise your hand if you don't know what Pathfinder is. Okay, briefly for the three of you. Pathfinder is a tabletop role-playing game. It started in 2000. The brand started in 2009. The game itself started in brand started in 2007. The game itself started in 2009. It's kind of an offshoot of the 3.5 edition of the world's oldest role-playing game. That's what we're calling it.
Yes, that is what we're calling it.
And it's been very, very popular. It's actually been the category leader in tabletop RPG since about 2010. So,
doing it right.
Thank you. So, Jason and my background is primarily in tabletop games, but as the publisher and the lead designer of the game, we've had some insight into some of the developments that have happened over the last year or so in the computer space, which is really exciting for us. So the first one, the big thing that is the furthest along, is a game called Pathfinder Online. Has anybody heard of this game, Pathfinder Online? Cool. Pathfinder Online, thank you. I would say that's at least 2 steps higher than Tepid.
Yay!
Pathfinder Online is a MMO. It's being produced by a company called Gobbocast. It was funded via Kickstarter. So basically, last year we did a Kickstarter for Pathfinder Online and raised over $1 million. If you'll indulge me, I'd like to talk a little bit about the tabletop side of that. So we did a big effort there, and we did a book called The Emerald Spire Super Dungeon. And thank you. There it is, right there. It's a real thing. Emerald Spire Super Dungeon is a 16-level dungeon, and it kept growing throughout the Kickstarter process. So every time we hit a certain goal, we added another author, and eventually we got to 16 authors. Jason and I both designed the level of the dungeon. This is for use with the tabletop RPG. It was really fun. We got basically 16 of the top names from tabletop RPGs, a lot of the core Paizo Pathfinder contributors, but also people who've been doing things for Dungeons & Dragons and other RPGs pretty much to the beginning of time. The most veteran person on that list is probably Frank Menser, who is the editor of the D&D Redbox. And our special guest just sent me a text that says "trapped on walkway." Oh, good. He'll be here shortly. But yeah, Frank was the guy behind the D&D Redbox that introduced a lot of us to, including Jason, I believe, to the tabletop hobby. So that was really great. But also other names like Chris Pramus, who's the president of Green Ronin Games, Mike Stackpole, famous author, a lot of older RPG credits, but also he did the Rogue Squadron books for the Star Wars novels. Our CEO, Lisa Stevens, who's a longtime RPG person, and just a bunch of RPG guys. We each got to design a level. That book is out on stands right now. There are some hints in that book and in a previous book that we put out called Thorn Keep about the region in which the Pathfinder Online game is set. Pathfinder Online is basically an open world, basically sandbox MMO. So it's not a big theme park MMO, it's a sandbox MMO. And the interesting thing about this, it's going to have a really robust economic system. A lot of the people who work on the game have worked on previous MMOs, and especially EVE Online. And so the idea is it's set in the River Kingdoms part of our world, which is kind of a rough and tumble, everybody can carve out a kingdom sort of land. And we expect a lot of kingdoms being carved out of other player characters, I think, in this game.
Absolutely. Player murder is a prime feature.
So this is a game where what the company that's doing it is called Goblinworks, and as I said, they're composed of a lot of veterans of MMOs and other video game companies, and they are creating basically a world, and the players themselves are going to create a lot of the story. And so it's going to be really interesting. A lot of people said to me, when they announced this game, they were kind of like, well, you know, Pathfinder as a brand is really about stories and really about adventure paths, which are campaigns that we publish every 6 months. And the Goblin Works project doesn't really have a lot of that. What's the deal? And my take on it is kind of like the Pathfinder Online is not so much an emulation of our adventure paths, but it's almost more like an emulation of the world itself. And it's set in the most cutthroat, dangerous part of the world. And so the fact that there's going to be a lot of people contesting for different kingdoms and a lot of power struggles between characters themselves really does fit, I think, like a glove into the River Kingdoms part of our world. So that game, Jason, you've seen some of the stuff in that game. What are your impressions?
Yeah, I've been involved in the early playtesting phases from when it was, from the very early days when there were no collision physics, and you could just run through everything, and they taught me a cheat code that made me jump up like 4 miles. That was always fun. Up to its state now, where we're starting to allow various playtesters in. And it's starting to become a thing, right? You know, it's creation of an MMO is a long process, and it's really interesting to me how every single time I log back into it, it's like the game is radically different. It's taken a huge step forward. The guys there are you know, working nearly around the clock to get bits and pieces of this ready. And, you know, so my first experience with the game was just kind of running around finding monsters to kill and trying not to get killed by Lisa, who was like stalking me like I was playing a monster.
That's our CEO.
Yeah, these days we go up, and because she can't play it at home because of her internet connection there, you'll go upstairs and the door to her office will be closed,
right.
And we'll open it up, and inside she's sitting there playing an MMO. It's like, you're the CEO, do some work, damn it. But yeah, right now, some of the real cool features that are coming online are the escalation cycles are really starting to take shape. And so basically this is an MMO, and I'm sure many of you have played MMOs before of various types or video games that are similar. What makes this really interesting is you've got this kind of large open world, and you've got a bunch of players and an incredibly loud seminar behind me. Oh, wow, shut up already. All right, these escalation cycles just pop up. So you've got these communities, and there's you know, players running around between them, and then a tribe of goblins will show up. And at first it'll just be a couple goblins running around with their swords and fire, and all of a sudden there'll be more of them, and more of them, and more of them. And if the players don't take care of them, they grow into an unstoppable horde that just kind of dominates a zone until the players kind of gang up and beat them back. And there's a lot of different types of these escalation cycles. So the one I was having the most fun with is they made priests of Rasmir. And they started showing up to spread prosperity.
Who's Rasmir, Jason?
Rasmir is the living god. All hail the living god. He's really a god. No, I promise.
He's not really a god.
No. Yeah. No. They're like a bully cult. Like, you know, think the snake cult from Conan, where it's like these guys are just a bunch of thugs. And they showed up, so I was, for the first time ever in a video game, I was killed by something I invented. which is pretty damn awesome.
What the name of critter got killed?
What was that?
What the name of critter you got killed your own creation?
Yeah, the priests of Rasmir killed me. Yeah, they teamed up on me with their masks and their swords.
Yeah, it's a god that Jason invented in our game, which is sweet justice, I think.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Turnabout is fair play.
It's really, just for a second to sort of compare the tabletop RPG side to the video game side, it's been really interesting because when we're writing books or developing an adventure or something, it kind of grows very gradually. You know, from a writer's perspective, it's like, okay, I did 1,000 words on this adventure that day, I did 2,000 words the next day, and as it goes through editing and as a couple pieces of art come in, you see this thing kind of grow organically. The thing about video games that's been so interesting to watch is it's almost more like they spend a lot of time sort of building Legos, and it looks like nothing for the longest time, and then you come in and they're like, oh, let me show you the new build, and all of a sudden there's a video game. So it's been like, it just jumps like leaps and bounds almost every time that we see it. Pathfinder Online is currently in alpha playtest. There's actually people playing it right now. Do we have anyone here in the room who is actually playing? Wow, okay, cool.
Not at the moment.
Well, I don't mean like right this second, but I mean in general. So, although if you're playing right this second, I'm sure everyone would love to see what it looks like. Basically, you can see what it looks like right now on twitch.tv/GoblinWorks. There are videos going on. There are a lot of people who archive videos. Around, basically, there's a live broadcast on Fridays at 6 p.m. Pacific time, which is GoblinWorks is based in Seattle, very near Paizo. So you can check that out. There are archive videos as well. Early enrollment for the game will start on September 15th, and that's tied into the Kickstarter, people who backed that. People who want to jump in now who maybe missed the Kickstarter can purchase early enrollment to the game for $100, which gives you 3 months of game time, or $50, which is 1 month of game time, and that will start in October. The folks who backed the Kickstarter are the first ones who are going to be able to get in that, and in fact a lot of them are already playing. Also, if you go to GoblinWorks.com and you type in the code GenCon PAX 14, you can get a discount if you're interested in jumping in early. That's GenCon PAX 14. Apparently not DragonCon.
We couldn't get DragonCon in there.
There's too many cons in this month, but so yeah, I encourage you guys to check that out. It's been really, really cool to see. You know what the hell? Yeah, you have a question, sir?
I have a question about the game mechanics of the game.
Yeah.
Is it as easily like I am a DM in my in Pathfinder.
Okay.
I currently run the Root Lords.
Great.
And one of my players, well, basically he played D&D for like 20 years, so he's really good at this. He found a way to make his character who's a magus do over 2,000 damage with one hit.
What? I'd like to talk to Jason here about that.
In this game.
The class system in this game is really interesting. Unlike other MMOs, you're not siloed into one class. You can start picking and choosing bits from various different classes, so you can kind of make the character you want to play. And you can just start picking up abilities from the various different subsets. I don't know all the technical specifics on it, but I don't think you don't like pick fighter or paladin or cleric. You just start picking up abilities as you play and gain experience.
The game system itself is not a direct port of the tabletop Pathfinder game. It's thematically, it's like a thematic adaptation more than a direct adaptation of the game rules. Really, what works in the tabletop is not the same thing as what works in a computer game, especially in an MMO. And so they've created a whole bunch of different mechanics basically behind it. And so I don't know if there's going to be hideous exploits on those mechanics, but if there are, they'll be tremendously different than the hideous exploits that your friend has discovered with the Magus class. And we have more questions. Yes, sir?
Are all the races and classes available?
No, they're kind of building it more or less piecemeal. Right now there's humans in the game, and they're working on dwarves and elves, and I think halflings or gnomes are kind of on deck essentially. And so a lot of that stuff will end up being implemented by the time the game actually launches in basically 2016-ish. But they're kind of building it along. One of the things that's pretty cool about the way GoblinWorks is running the program is they're doing something that they're called crowd forging, which really means that they're turning to the community and letting the community have a role in deciding kind of how they're going to develop it. So they might sometime in the future say, okay, look, it's a small team, right? So they can't do everything. So they'll say, all right, maybe we can add these couple of new classes, or maybe we could add gnomes. What do you guys want us to do first? And so a lot of the community is able to kind of influence some of the decisions that they're making about the game. So elves, dwarves, and humans are on the short list. Humans are fully active in the game right now. Elves and dwarves are very shortly going to be coming online, and then they'll get to gnomes and halflings later. What's that? Not as playable PCs. Right now in the game there are goblins, and when I say one type of monster, I mean there's like 6 or 7 different versions of these monsters. But there's goblins, there's all kinds of like canines like wolves and goblin dogs and dogs. There's skeletons and other various sort of ghouls and undead. There's
those
ogres.
damnable ogres.
The Pathfinder ogre is really distinctive looking, and it's been really cool to see that kind of brought into 3 dimensions. You guys were playing. Am I forgetting anything?
Humans.
Well, yeah, humans, bandits, cultists. You know, there's a pretty decent variety of enemies, but they're continuing to work on more of them as well. At present, there are not any plans to have players play some of the, you know, quote unquote evil races as of yet. Now, no rat folk, of course.
So if you, we're going to take questions by just raising your hand at this point. So we're going to start here.
Yeah, we have a microphone, which will make it a little easier for everybody to hear. And it's apparently not working, which is cool. So let's see, what else? There's a ton of items. There's going to be a really robust crafting system in the game. So players will be able to have, you know, if they want to focus on being an adventurer, they can focus on being an adventurer. If you want to focus on being like a craft person, you can do that. Eventually, the economy is really going to be a major part of this game and will drive a lot of the conflict and the activity going on.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of that comes down to your community and your settlement. This game has a very strong drive for the players to kind of organize into groups. And once you're in a group, and I know they don't use the term guild, but I can't remember the term that they use.
Settlements and companies.
Companies, that's it, yeah. So you form a company, and eventually your company can form a settlement. And your settlement is literally, you start building buildings on the landscape. Like, the buildings that are there were built by you and your allies, right? So it's not like, you know, many MMOs where you walk up to a town and the town was built by the game designers and it just sits there and, you know, you can interact with it and then you can leave and it's still there. These buildings are actually, you decide what buildings they are, you put them up, they are upgraded and advanced by you. You are the ones creating the kind of landscape here. Otherwise it's just giant swaths of untamed wilderness. And the crafting plays a big role in that, you know, you need a lot of raw materials, you need a lot of pieces and influence and various ratings to get these buildings up and running. And as you do so, they unlock more and more things for the characters who visit that settlement. And now, the interesting thing is, because there is a heavy PvP element to this game, the characters end up with ratings of alignments and things like that, so you can actually have a settlement where it's like, okay, well, the evil guys who stab people out in the wilderness, they can't come into my community. When they do, the guards there, the NPC guards that spawn, will murder them. A lot. But it's a lot of murder.
This game is going to be murder heavy.
Yeah, it's murder. Murder is a high focus. So, you know, there's a lot of kind of different things in this game, right? I mean, you know, being able to build your own settlement and things like that isn't something that a lot of MMOs allow you to do. So we're really excited to see how that plays out. It's still coming together. They're still putting together the pieces of it, but a lot of that's going to be ready for launch. So.
Can I get?
Yes, please, sir.
Mainly curious, how is death and character resurrection going to be handled in this game? Do you die and then immediately respawn at a nearby point? Do you have to get like your spirit back in your body, or do you just sit there and rot until some good Samaritan with a couple $1,000 grand of gold doesn't 12 5?
Currently, when you die, your spirit is whisked away to a statue of Pharasma, I believe, where you respawn. However, your body, your corpse is left there for your enemies to loot. So they get to rifle through your stuff and be like, oh, that's a nice thing, thanks. I'll just be taking that, you know. Good luck.
Now you can thread certain items to your character so that they're not stealable, but you're going to have to be very careful about what you bring on your adventures and what you don't. The sort of overall storyline is that Pharasma, the goddess of death, there's some kind of curse or something, some magical effect on the land that is allowing people to basically come back to life when they die, which is somewhat unlike the tabletop game. Yes, sir.
So I had a follow-on to that previous question.
Yes.
Buildings and crafting in general. So if I'm a dwarf, I take stonemasonry and architecture, can I start building keeps and castles and go beyond just the wood buildings?
Oh yeah, I mean
does that involve, any way change the PvP scenario to where now you have fortresses and guards?
Yeah, so one of the things is, like, as you upgrade your settlement, it gets more and more defended. And settlements can go to war with each other. And they can throw up the war flag, and they can go to task against each other, right? And in those periods of time, no one takes rep hits for, doing PvP. And you can just go and just have all-out war between two settlements. And ultimately, you can destroy each other, right? I mean, but upgrading your buildings and taking them from wood to stone and things like that, and adding fortifications and things like that is going to be a part of the game. I don't know if it's going to be the sort of thing where a giant keep plops down out of the sky.
No,
but it's more like buildings and things like that.
I mean, one of the things that, so Jason and I, or between the two of us, we're in 2 meetings every week about Pathfinder Online. And one of them is sort of a game design meeting where they, because as I said, they have to sort of translate the tabletop game into something that will work for the MMO environment. And they'll say, kind of, here's what we're thinking. We want to kind of rename this ability. How does that work with you guys, or what have you? And then the other meeting we do every Friday is an art meeting where they kind of say, okay, here's what the dwarves are going to look like, and here's what the elves are going to look like, or here's what the keep is going to look like. And we've seen now, like, I think there's maybe 7 different iterations of a lot of these buildings. In terms of how they get bigger and things, and you're going to need, and I think it's going to be very, very difficult for like one character to build a keep. You're really going to need to band together, and multiple characters with multiple different disciplines will have to almost fulfill like a recipe in order to make the locations grow in strength.
But would it take like the architect profession to be designed?
There's various different skills and professions. It depends on the type of building you're building. So it's not just one skill fits all. It's one skill, if you're a really good herbalist, that lets you build an herbalist shop, or that sort of thing. I think there are some things like that. I'm not 100% sure of the process, but I know that is part of it. So you need to have a fully functioning community, and with all of the bells and whistles, you really kind of need a lot of characters with a lot of different skills, all close to max. That way you can build everything you need. And then, of course, you need a bunch of bruisers to stand around and make sure nobody comes and burns it down when you're not looking.
Right. Question in front here.
Has Goblin Works considered using any of the Pathfinder iconic villains, like any Whispering Tyrants or Rune Lords or...
Whispering Tyrants? You need more than one?
Well, the game is set in the River Kingdoms, so there's not a lot of Rune Lords and things which are from almost the other side of the continent, but they do have a lot. It is very much distinctly Pathfinder. Like the goblins are Pathfinder goblins. The ogres are Pathfinder ogres. There's the Cult of Rasmir's in the game. There are other organizations. There'll be Hell Knights in the game. There are statues of some of the iconic characters positioned throughout the game, like Valoros and Sione and stuff like that. The inns all have little pieces of art from our art catalog, is like framed art, in their inns and stuff like that. So it very much feels like a Pathfinder world. As of yet, they haven't put a lot of like specific villains or anything in there, because I think that their take on it, at least so far, is that a lot of that conflict is going to be player versus player conflict, and not like written out storylines and things. Now that said, there are going to be some quests and missions and stuff, but so far it's not. It's a lot of that's going to be on the players. Yes.
Just one question with the crafting system. I'm pretty sure.
It's a little hard for us to hear. Could you speak up just a little bit?
Sorry.
No problem.
With the crafting, is the crafting going to be more player-driven or completely player-driven? Or obviously, if that's the game's going to have some NPC shops and stuff like that. I'm just wondering if it's like bare bones basic stuff that's going to be in the NPC shops, or if they're looking at going into I don't know if you know the reference, but the EVE Online theme of almost everything is player-driven unless you go on a mission or something like that.
Yeah.
My impression is it's going to be more like that. That it's really player-driven. I mean, the idea is that this is kind of a living, breathing world where the player characters basically do almost everything. Now, there will be some shops where you can buy some stuff, but I think that if what you're looking to do in the game is like create a kingdom and kick ass and be dominant, it's going to mean you're going to need not just the warriors and the wizards and stuff, but you'll also need characters who are crafters and things like that. And there's not much stopping you from having a couple of different characters, so you can have multiple tracks going kind of at the same time. The guy in the blue, yes sir.
So tying back in with going back to PvP structures, will like a large group of people in the environment be able to destroy someone else's structures they built?
Yeah.
So that's a
siege engines.
There'll be siege engines and stuff.
That's
gonna be pretty brutal.
Yeah, it's a yes, but there are some elements of like needing to declare war and things like that. Because so if I gather up me and Well, all of you. We all make characters. We all band together. We all go and just decide to burn every settlement to the ground. We could do that. We totally could. However, we're all going to take such horrible reputation hits, that we can't go to any other lawful or good settlement and get any good gear or level up our stuff. We're basically outcasts now. And there are evil settlements that we might be able to go to, but they don't have as good a stuff as the good settlements. So, you can play with those sorts of things, and I'm sure, for some people that'll become a fun hobby of theirs, is just running around trying to burn stuff down. But it's not so easy as just like walk up, click 4 to destroy building. It's not quite that simple. So, so.
And there are a couple of key towns that are not going to be sackable or anything like that.
There are a couple NPC settlements,
Yes. Yeah, I mean, there'll be both clerics, I think, and paladins in the game. Certainly clerics in the game right now. And you will be able to pick gods and things. Now, alignment is a little bit more fungible in this game than it is in the RPG. So if you say you're a lawful good cleric and you go around murdering people all the time, you will find that you are no longer a lawful good. And that will have all kinds of repercussions in the game, a lot of like what Jason said. And I'm pretty sure you're not going to be able to be a murderous cleric of Iomedae or something like that. So that's a great question. I don't know. Maybe.
The class structure doesn't quite work like that. So you don't pick a class and gain levels in it. You pick from the suite of abilities that class has and train up in them. And so you can pick some of Rogue and you can get some of Wizard. So it's not like things flip and move around. Once you have them, you have them. As far as structure goes, it doesn't quite work the same way. It's not a direct translation like that.
Yes, sir.
Hey, you've been talking a lot about player interaction, whether helping each other, killing each other, somewhere in between. But is there a plan for like large group PvE? Because that is a big thing of MMOs these days too.
Yeah.
That's pretty much escalation.
So the escalation cycles are where your PvE comes in. So you've got all these settlements, and you've got the other player characters you need to deal with. And so, like we said, crafting and whatnot is an important part of the game. Well, to do crafting, you need to get resources, and resources live out in the wilderness. Well, that's where the hexes are between settlements, right? So that's where those are. But that's also where the escalation cycles show up. So it can really put a damper on your community if your community doesn't keep those in check. And sometimes you won't be able to help it, because sometimes they ramp up really quickly. But you're still going to have to struggle and make sure that you keep those things in check, because otherwise it locks down your movement between places, because there's all these monsters in the way, and it makes it very difficult for you to continue to gain resources. So, when the goblins show up, they start out as just a couple goblins hanging around. But if you let them go for a number of hours, at least that's what they have it timed out as right now, it eventually turns into a whole tribe of goblins, with a goblin king who's hanging out being a nuisance. I would assume he's on a giant throne of skulls, eating chicken or something, and lighting things on fire. I'm not sure that's in the game.
No,
yet.
it's not.
There's no
He's pretty much
chicken.
just standing there.
The opponent is going to kill you.
Yeah. Well, he's pretty much just standing there right now. Well, that's not as fun. But it's all coming along. So, so that's basically what it is.
Yes?
Will there be quests that we can take and dungeons we can go in to get cool shinies?
There are quests in the game. They're pretty much like kill X number of goblins, or go and touch these 3 things, or whatever. A little more complicated than that, actually. But
way to sell it.
That's not a dirty.
Touch
right?
3 things.
Touch 3 things. They're like exploration quests, basically. But one of the things that's a little puzzling about the game is there are not dungeons in the game right now. That's something they're going to be building in later. Right now, they're focusing on the landscape and the settlements and the buildings. This is not a World of Warcraft killer game. This is a smaller game, and they're building it sort of as they go. And in the beginning, dungeons are not a part of the game.
Hey guys, setting's really important to me. How much did you say you guys have, and people like James Jacobs, people creating the lore you have in this game? Would you say
this temple with nothing like this. I'm not going to find.
There is a lot of that, actually. I mean, you know, there is an element of we're coming from a world where we're based mostly on our imagination, and at worst, something that an illustrator has to draw. You know, so sometimes we'll be like, no, you know, a Temple of Desna should have 9 towers and 800 flapping flags and a bunch of spheres, and they're like, no, it can't. You know, so there are some technical limitations, but James, in particular, our creative director, James Jacobs, is in all the meetings that I'm in, both on the game side and on the art side in particular. And that's where a lot of the look comes in. I mean, we've had lots of conversation. A great example for, just to reference something that happened recently is we as a company are really dedicated to diversity. Like, we really have, like, our iconic characters come from a wide variety of backgrounds and ethnicities and things like that. And as Goblinworks was putting this together, they said, well, what about like elves and dwarves and things? You know, can you have like a dark-skinned dwarf or a Asian elf? You know, that kind of a thing. And we're like, well, yeah, of course. And they're like, great. What does it look like? And we're like, I don't know. We've never done it. And so we've, as part of the Friday art process, have been going through lots of concept art and trying to like figure out, really kind of nailing down, like, what does a female dwarf look like? We haven't illustrated a ton of them in our game, right? So do they have beards? Do they not have beards?
I thought they just look like the males.
It turns out they don't have beards, but they do have pretty elaborate hairstyles and things. And so, and you know, the way video games work is a little bit different. So like, okay, well, here's the hairless head, and then here's 5 different hairstyles or 9 different hairstyles, and it's just been really interesting to see it develop in that way. You know, we're much more used to getting a completed image, and you know, the video game is much more about building blocks and pieces that they can put together. And so we've been saying there all along, you know, and our art directors in all those meetings as well. So our goal, and I think Goblinworks has done a good job of this so far, is to really make the game feel and look authentically Pathfinder. Now, that said, I mean, it's authentically Pathfinder with a different game system and no dungeons. Yes, sir.
Will player characters be able to acquire templates like into the vampires and bitches?
I wish.
Not at first. That's not a primary goal.
Oh no, I've got the lich condition. I better go back to town before this gets worse.
Yes, sir.
Okay, a lot of the MMOs have personalization. Say, for example, Guild Wars does it by looks, EverQuest does it by your house. What kind of personalization are we going to use this game?
You're going to be able to customize your character pretty significantly. Right now in the alpha, you know, if you pick a human, you've got only a couple of choices in terms of their face or whatever, but eventually the plan is to have sliders on pretty much all the elements of the face, so you can like change your nose or your chin or whatever. You're also going to be able to color your outfits pretty significantly. They've been building all of the different armors and outfits with lots of different color areas that can be changed out. I'm not 100% sure yet if those will be through dyes that you acquire or if that's going to be something as part of the character creation process. Probably a little bit of both. So it's going to be a lot of that. And then there's been talk of, you know, character settlements, like, or not settlements, but like locations like houses. And there's a few people who, as part of the Kickstarter, are getting unique taverns that they're going to get to own, you know, in the wilderness, and each of those will be customized. And so, yeah, I mean, I think that as the game continues and as it grows, you'll see more and more customization options added to the game for sure. Yes. It is. Yes.
In terms of like, I guess, class specialization, let's say you go for a wizard path, like you mentioned, are you going to be able to specialize in school like necromancy or something like that? For example, like casting a sound.
I'm not 100% sure. If I recall correctly, I'm not sure it's like I decide to make a conscious choice to specialize, but if you only take the powers that are along one theme, you can certainly do that.
Yeah.
You mentioned a significant part of the economy. Is the economy going to be based around an auction house, or will you flip the switch and turn your character into a vendor?
I believe there will be an auction house. I think that is going to be part of it. I think, you know, they definitely want that economic balancing engine on the back end for that. And yeah, so I don't think you become a vendor, although that would be kind of awesome. Just like all of a sudden an icon appears, oh, I'm going to go buy from Bob.
I'm pretty sure that you'll be able to create and contribute things within your settlement and your company and stuff to one another.
Yeah, like so if you set up
it will behoove you to have a number of allies who are not just like warriors and wizards and stuff, but also crafters and things, and everyone will work together to increase the power of their settlement.
In regards to the settlements themselves, is there going to be any mechanics related to the Ultimate Campaign Club where you're actually setting rules for, like you have an ambassador or the rules that you guys develop? Will that be a part of the settlement where you'll get bonuses and things of that nature for your settlement based on the character roles?
Yes, but I'm not 100% sure they're mapping it to the Ultimate Campaign, right? I mean, there will be different goals or different sort of roles to play within the settlement, but I'm really not thinking that they're going to map to that.
Hooray, yeah. We've got a level 47 Cooper.
I know, we've got a couple people who are actually playing the game and might have some answers up front here, but yes, yeah.
You mentioned earlier that you get different skills from different classes to customize your character. What are the classes?
There's cleric, there's rogue, there's fighter, there's wizard. That's what's in the game right now, and then they're working on pretty much all of the core Pathfinder classes, which would include like bard and monk and paladin and ranger and druid and sorcerer and all pretty much everything. They're going to eventually try and get pretty much everything in the game.
To help answer the question before, there will be an aristocrat class or role where you can actually gain skills to help your settlement in times of war and actually help them improve.
Right.
But would you talk a little bit about the power escalation, how you gain experience over time, and how that relates to the other MMOs that have been out there?
Yeah. Can you answer that one?
I could talk a little bit about it. I'm not fully versed on it because I haven't. It kept resetting, so I didn't. Yeah. I never gained anything. A lot of it has to do with time.
Yes.
So once you log in on your character, the clock starts, and you gain spendable experience just by being online,
and not by killing things.
And killing things that you don't get little XP bags that land in your lap. So. Destroying the escalation cycles, getting rid of monsters has its own reward. In that they aren't sacking your town or making life a living hell for anybody going anywhere. So instead, just over time, you garner experience that you can apply. And if you have multiple characters, you can decide which one's getting experience, so you can kind of slowly level them up over time. This kind of gives you the ability to have your character kind of become better without necessarily having to spend endless hours grinding away and wandering around killing goblin number 4,780.
Right, there's no like chicken killing phase in this game.
Chicken
or little rats.
They don't have chickens yet.
Yeah.
Gotta get them to add chickens.
Yes.
As the game progresses, there could be kind of safeguards to prevent like super subtle veterans from creating an oppressive environment for new players.
I hate to say it, but these guys behind us make it really hard to hear the question.
As the game progresses, is there any kind of safeguards that are going to be implemented to protect newer players from being oppressed by veterans?
Yes.
Yeah. So first of all, when you're new, you start out in one of the NPC settlements, which allows you to kind of get your footing and get yourself set before you have to start even dealing with other players. That's pretty typical in most MMOs to give you kind of a safe harbor environment where you can start building your character and get them going before you have to, form alliances and, join groups and stuff like that. But the big thing is, right, we do have PvP, but you can't just wander around and murder people without taking rep hits, and those will really start to impact you, especially if you're a higher level player trying to go towards some of the high-end stuff for the game. Because you can only train up some of those skills at high-end settlements, and the only settlements that have those, generally speaking, are the good settlements. And if you tank your rep, then you can't go to those settlements and get training. So there's elements of it, and so you can't just wander around and grief people. I mean, you can. If you want to eat rocks, you can eat rocks. But in doing so, you will make it so that your character basically can't advance anymore without spending a whole bunch of time fixing that rep problem. So Otherwise, the only other way to do that is, I mean, you know, and to top it off, if you do go full evil, other people can kill you without penalty. So that can just
kind of awesome.
Yeah, it's like, oh, it's an evil guy. Kill that guy. It's just fun.
There's another element to it as well, which is that just because you've played a lot more and thus have accrued a lot more experience, it doesn't necessarily make you super more powerful than the younger players, if you will, right? You're going to be much more broadly powerful and have lots more diverse abilities, and you know, you might be able to pick up some crafting things or some other skills, but you're not necessarily going to be 10 times better than a character if you've played 10 times longer. Does that make sense?
For those of you familiar with the power curves of other MMOs, this one doesn't kind of do the linear whoop at the end. It's pretty linear all the way across. I mean, it rises, but it doesn't do anything dramatic. There's not a point where it turns into a roller coaster.
Yes, sir.
So we were just talking about leveling up by being logged in, essentially gaining experience passively. What's to stop people sort of just taping down the arrow key and scanning it and seeks out, leaving their PC on overnight, just passively gaining experience without actually playing the game?
The fact that you passively gain experience whether you're logged in or not. You just keep gaining experience.
Everybody gets it, yeah. Just primarily because of that reason of like, they just got one of those birds that ding, ding, you know, hits the space bar.
Yep. Before the game goes public, is everything going to reset, or will new people going to come in?
Okay, so quickly, I think the earliest, we're not a Kickstarter backer, I think the earliest you can get is actually October. So there's that. And then, I don't know, do you guys know they're resetting?
There will be a reset before September 15th at the end of Alpha.
Okay, so
but
you'll
we
be...
don't think there's one afterwards.
You'll be about
There's
a
not
month behind
planned to be one afterwards ever.
Right.
I'm building a world for you to go out into that's higher than the start towns.
Yeah. So they're all the alpha stuff that's going on now is going to be erased. But once the game starts in September, then it's on. And then if you join in October, or join in 3 months later, you know the characters who start a little bit sooner will have a little bit of an XP advantage. But again, because of the flat, or the flatter advancement curve, those characters are not supposed to have a significant, combat advantage. They'll just be a little bit more diverse. Yeah.
Will you be able to reset or retrain skills, and if so, to what extent? So you're able to change to I don't really want to be a fighter anymore. Maybe I want to be a wizard now, or go buy all of those. Is that kind of thing possible? Or?
So once you've bought the skills and abilities for your character, they're yours forever. And you can kind of turn them off and use different ones if you want. But you can't take the points out of one thing and put them into another thing. But you can start training up the other thing. And then once you've got them both up, you can just swap between them.
So this is the first tabletop RPG or MMO that has abandoned the tabletop mechanics for different MMO mechanics. I wonder if you could say something about why it is that that tends to be the case. But why is it that tabletop mechanics don't work for MMOs?
I think there's a variety of reasons for that. I think that because all of the math is being subsumed behind a computer screen, there's not really much of a need to have it work the same way, right? And I think there's also some licensing issues, but...
Well, I think the main gameplay reason is that the MMOs, people want their advancement to be a lot more granular. Like in the game, it's just kind of like your character is the same for 4 or 5 adventures, and Ka-chunk, all of a sudden he's more powerful in 7 different ways. And the way that they just kind of want to, I think, reward the time investment a little bit more by having more gradual increases. So I think that's a big part of it. And I think also that to some degree the math of the tabletop game is dictated by the dice. And a game like Pathfinder Online doesn't need to only have 20 possibilities and the variability of the game itself.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
How are you guys handling long distance travel and vehicle games?
Are we handling long distance travel and what?
Vehicle games, like Final Minutes or Air.
Well, the whole thing is based on basically hexes. The entire world of the game is all within what in the Pathfinder world would be considered essentially one country. So we're not talking about vast overland distances. We're talking about, you know, walkable or you know, it may take a day or two in game to walk from one end to the other, but we're not talking about huge, vast distances.
Yeah, there's not porting right at the moment. There's no Hearthstone equivalent right at the moment, and nor is there mounts. Although I think it's
they're working on mounts and stuff, but there's no horses in the game as of yet. Yes, sir.
I'd just like to address the question around retraining. Ever since I've been on the threads, I've said I'm going to be a monk. There won't be a monk character until after open enrollment in 2016. That still does not mean that I'm not going to play and develop a character in the game. But when that role becomes available, I will start to retrain, to train additional skills in that role, because that's what I want to get to. But I think that one of the great things about this game is that you can create your own path for your character by the skills that are trained, by the opportunities that are invested in how you work with communities. It's going to be, I mean, you can personalize this character all you want and really be able to live this character in this game.
Thank you.
I'm going to take a couple more questions, and then I have another thing I want to segue into. So, yep, please.
One quick. Is there going to be like a cap plateau, so to speak, for the characters, or is it pretty much as long as you feel like spending your time and points and other things, you just keep going until you've learned everything?
There isn't really a leveling system, so it's not like you go from level 1 to level 2 to level 3 to level 4. You level up various different abilities, and I mean, hypothetically, over time, you could collect them all, right? Although I think they've done the math and the amount of time to do that.
They're building it in such a way that it would take forever to be
2.5 years.
everything. I think there may even be some things that are mutually exclusive and stuff like that. But yeah, their individual skills will have caps, but there's not going to be a cap on your character. There's not going to be a point where it's like you can't make your character any better. Yeah. Another quick question, and then I got to shift topic for just a second. And I don't need to monopolize it. We'll come back to questions too, but yeah.
I just wanted to ask, how much would it cost? Is it really $50 per month or $100 per 3 months until 16?
Right. Only for the early enrollment stuff is it cost extra to get in. It will be cheaper when the game itself starts.
Around 15 a month.
About $15 a month. Yeah. So if you're willing to wait, you can wait.
And it's not going to be $50 per month subscription. It is $50 a month to get in, which includes a month, and then I think it's $15 after that.
Yeah, that's the plan.
Did that clarify?
So we're going to turn it back over to the panelists, but we are going to let people come up after this is over.
Yeah, please feel free. So we've been talking a lot about Pathfinder Online and GoblinWorks. About 2 weeks ago at Gen Con, we announced another video game project. We have signed a multi-game development deal with Obsidian Studios, and they are going to be doing a number of Pathfinder games. The first one, the one that they've announced, is a tablet app for the Pathfinder Adventure card game, which has been an extraordinarily popular board game, card game over the last year. They're going to be taking the first sort of campaign for that, which is the Rise of the Rune Lords, based off of our original RPG campaign, and they are going to be doing a tablet card game, version of the card game. Now, the Pathfinder Adventure card game is awesome. The box is about this big, and it comes with like 500 cards, and then there's like 600 additional cards that you can add into it. So, if only as a space-saving measure, I'm personally very excited about this game. They had at Gen Con a couple of weeks ago a playable demo of this game already, and it looks fantastic. It feels like a card game on the tablet, but it also feels like a computer game. It's got some cool animations, it's got neat little cutscenes with some dialogue and things like that.
And birds.
And the flying birds and flapping hair. It's really amazing. And they've done a great job. The guys at Obsidian came to us. They play Pathfinder, both the RPG and the adventure card game, pretty much every lunchtime in their conference rooms. And when they told us that, I'm like, that's funny because we all go home and play Fallout New Vegas. And so there's like this weird mutual love fest going on between our two companies. It's quite enjoyable. And so that's what they've announced. That's going to be coming out in 2015. They're already significantly into the design and development of that game. Then there will be other games as well. And I'm not really allowed to say what those games will be, but if you take a look at Obsidian and some of the games that they've done in the past for other sort of RPG tie-ins, it should be pretty obvious kind of where they're shooting for. So we're extremely excited to be working with Obsidian. We see pretty much eye to eye with them, and we're really looking forward to those projects as well. And I just wanted to make sure we had a special guest who's trapped in a habit trail, trying to make his way here, but I was waiting for him to get here to talk about it, but I wanted to make sure we didn't finish up, and I'm happy to answer questions about any of that stuff as well. So, Obsidian as well. So we have at least 3-ish video games in development right now.
I think what we usually do is that everybody, are we done with Jason? We need everybody to just wrap this up, or?
It's 4:51, so happy to take a couple more questions, as long as DragonCon is happy to have us here.
Get out.
So will the tablet version of the adventure card game, is that designed to allow one person to play by themselves, or will you be able to hook in with other people?
Both. It will, like the card game, you will be able to play a single-player version of the game, but it's also going to be designed to be networked with friends and things
And is that connecting to someone else's tablet or around one tablet?
I think it's probably both, but I know for sure it's connecting to somebody else's tablet. I'm pretty sure they're going to do passive play too, but I don't know off the top of my head. Yes, sir. Yeah.
Online, are you going to be able to have more than one character?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
If you go evil, are you permanent?
I don't think anything's permanent. I think it's all based on your behavior.
You can spend a great deal of time going around feeding puppies and orphans, I think, and try and redeem yourself, but it's a long road. Click 7 to feed a puppy.
Yes, sir.
Y'all were talking about the skills and all the skills that you need to make this episode. If you're not really into the hack and slash, will this game be okay to just come in to make stuff and just sell it?
Yeah,
and all that stuff?
absolutely.
And actually just enjoy the fun?
Yes.
Yeah.
Very much so.
Until your community gets attacked and you're sitting there in an anvil trying to forge a sword and you get stabbed in the face.
Right. That might be a problem. You're going to want to look out for the face stabbing.
No doubt.
There will be a lot of face stabbing.
Press 2 to stab face.
Yes, sir.
So, for example, a character could play for months without actually leveling up any fighting skills.
Right. Yes.
And rely on other characters who exclusively go to fight. And is there a benefit then to going exclusively combat-oriented to provide defensive services to supplements?
I think the primary, I think it's really tailored to what kind of game you're interested in playing yourself. So I think the benefit is like your own satisfaction.
So it's not like even you have hire out, like, can somebody maybe make a company personally?
Yes.
Yeah, you could. Yeah. Now, did you want to add
So,
something to
yeah,
that?
interestingly enough, you can actually form a company, but a company does not have to have a settlement. So you can have a company that then goes around and allies itself with communities for payment to help deal with other communities when there being a problem.
Okay, and as a public service announcement, anyone more interested in Pathfinder can catch me immediately after the session. I have a live Twitch broadcast from User Nylon up if you wanted to see what things look like.
Yeah, very cool. Thank you, sir. Yeah, that's fantastic. Looks like we have time for a couple of more questions.
Anybody else?
It's the microphone game.
Okay.
Wasn't the Kingmaker set with the River Kingdoms?
Yeah,
Is
yeah.
that going to have any effect on it at all?
I think it's not a translation of the Kingmaker Adventure Path, but I think that it was like, I think the popularity of Kingmaker helped them to decide to do the River Kingdoms, and I wouldn't be surprised if there's some Easter eggs
So
and
is
things
it
like
probably
that.
going to be in that untamed state before you?
Yeah, very much so. Yeah. I guess this is our last question.
Yay! When the game goes live / official whatnot, are you guys going to be in the main system with other players? Like, can we quest with you guys? Or
Yeah. We're definitely going to have Paizo staff and stuff hanging out, at least at the beginning.
But we get God mode cheats, so it's fine.
Yeah, please don't stab us in the face. I can't make a reciprocal promise.
That doesn't matter at all.
Yeah, goblinworks.com is the main website for the Pathfinder Online. Of course, Paizo.com is your clearinghouse for all Paizo news, Paizo.com. Do encourage you to check out Gobbocast. They post blogs regularly with very detailed updates on where the game is going. There's some message boards that are linked to that through Paizo.com where people are posting updates about their Twitch feeds, about what their impressions of the game are, their hopes and thoughts about the game. And one thing I'll say is that the Gobbocast staff is just absolutely on those message boards, listening to that feedback, communicating with people. That's something that they've kind of taken from Paizo. That's a really important part of what we do. We really solicit input from the players, and because we're all in the same community, we're all players, and so it's really important to us to listen to what the players have to say. And Gobbocast has really taken that as a guide for how they are interacting with the players, and it's pretty unique, I think, and really interesting. So I do encourage you, if you're interested, to come by Paizo.com, come by Gobbocast.com, and get involved in the conversation. Thank you, you guys.
Thank you, everybody.